Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith.
Welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith. This is Season 2, Episode 8 with Pastor Rhonda and Pastor Seth. And
Yes.
I can't believe how beautiful it has been in the beautiful state of Georgia this week. It is like a fake spring.
No,
Again.
It turned so fast because it's been cold, like almost just like bitterly cold.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we have this nice weather. But the range in temperature every day has been astounding. I think it got down to 31 last night and it was up to 77 today. And
last Wednesday at church, it had snowed, and so I think the schools were out. What was it, Tuesday and Wednesday of last week?
That's right.
And so here we are, and my husband wore shorts to church tonight. So
feels so good.
Can happen. Yeah,
feels so good right now, and I'll take it. So this is what it was today, which was 77 is probably a little bit too high. I like 65 to 70. It's kind of my weather where I feel really, really good. Where, if I don't go outside, if I go outside, I'm not going to be sweating like crazy, but I'm not going to be cold. I can wear shorts and a hoodie, and that's good, and it feels nice. And so, that's my jam right there. And
I like about 72. That sounds good to me. And low humidity.
Yeah.
I can take it a little hotter if it's going to be low humidity. But it was beautiful today, just to see it's like flowers are starting to come up and things are starting to bloom. I think our trees are getting a little confused. Like, it's still February, we're not quite March yet, but flowers are starting to pop up. And so
I know we went on a bike ride with my kids last night and just kind of rode around the neighborhood, and we stopped. We have a creek down by, a couple streets over. We have a creek. And we were there, and there's little fishies, and they throw rocks in the creek and sticks and all that kind of fun stuff. But man, the animals, just the chirping of the frogs or the croaking of the frogs, and it was unbelievable, the animals. And so I think they're confused once again as well of like, oh man, this weather is really nice. I've heard the geese are kind of flying back north, kind of headed back that way as the weather and temperature changes. And so, but it's a good time. I think it's a lot of fun, when the seasons change, and it's that sign of life. It's a lot of those kind of things. And, I think you were able to participate this last weekend in things that show life in the church. You went to Gold Weekend, and I think you maybe explained a little bit of what that was for maybe some of our non-Nazarene people. But how did it go? You led music and were able to interact with people who are working towards ordination in the Church of the Nazarene. Give us a little update on how that went.
It was great. We had quite a few, I don't know if you call them students. Everyone is still in the course of study, but I love the process, and we got to meet the new DS. And he's awesome, and I got to spend some time with him. I didn't have to work at a table this year to work, actually with the students, but leading worship was enough. And so here's a funny story. I had heard that Pastor Spencer Baggett from Grace Point Church of the Nazarene was going to be leading like a campfire sing-along kind of thing on Friday night. And I know he plays guitar, but I don't know him real well.
Right.
But I was secretly thinking, oh, it'll be so cool if he would play guitar, while we do worship. Right. And but I didn't ask him because I chickened out. I don't know him real well, and I didn't want to say, hey, will you play guitar? I felt so weird about it. So, but when I was printing out my chord charts, I printed some out for guitar,
nice.
Just kind of hoping, maybe. So last Thursday night, I was sitting in the cafeteria, and he came up to me and he said, I don't know if you would be interested. He was real sweet. He didn't want to overstep, but he said, I've got a cajon in the car if you would like a little rhythm.
Nice.
And I was like, well, actually, I was hoping you would play guitar. As a matter of fact, I have printed the charts all for you. So, we did not have time to practice at all, except for maybe 2 to 3 minutes as everyone was coming into the tabernacle.
We just,
I was like just a crash course. Like, I skipped that bridge. I do this, and it turned out really well. He plays so good.
Awesome.
And it's been a while since Morgan's dad
Yeah.
was at our church, Mark Weiss,
Mm-hmm.
and he played guitar one Sunday. But since then, I mean, I've not really had that. So that was just such a blessing to me. And I love to lead worship at Camp Adrian because it just seems like the crowd just really sings down there and you can hear people singing. And this year we did something a little differently, and Pastor Spencer kind of got this ball rolling. But we have students that are Spanish speaking.
Okay.
We also have some Haitian students that are French speaking. And so every year they kind of get left out in worship because the lyrics on the screen have always just been in English.
Mm.
So this year we were able to put all three languages
That's
on
awesome.
the screen, and everybody was singing in their language. And so next year we're going to build on this.
That's awesome.
I'm hoping to put together a little band and praise team members. So it's a diverse praise team next year, and it's not going to be just me, but we'll be able to take turns and to share, someone leading and singing a verse or a course or something in their language. And I'm so excited. I have a year to work on it.
Yeah.
But it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful to see. I don't know. I get chills when I hear other languages just worshiping and praising the Lord, and especially when it's simultaneously. It's just, I don't know. It's beautiful.
That's great. Well, praise the Lord. So, yeah, I heard good reports. So sorry if you just heard a bang. It was me and my watch on my desk. So
it's usually me making all the weird noises, like picking up my cup, my roommate.
So no, that's great. I'm glad that it went well, and like I said, heard good things, and so I was excited to hear a report from you. We didn't get to really talk this last Sunday at church, and so my family was been sick this last week. It was probably good that they had some time out from school. My wife had a pinched nerve all week last week in her neck, and she was just struggling mightily. Wow. My kids were stuffy and just nasty and congested and snotty and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but yeah, so it's good to hear the report and to push forward with that. But I'm excited about our passage today.
Me too.
Yeah, this Sunday is it's the beginning of a transition out of Epiphany season. Pushing into the season we know as Lent, which is such an awesome season for the Christian calendar. And the passages that we're going to be looking at, today, I think are pushing us towards that because it's that push towards Jerusalem. It's the push towards the cross. And every year we have a Sunday that's known as Transfiguration Sunday, and that's what this Sunday is.
Yeah, the story is just so amazing. I think we could probably spend a couple of weeks here and just I don't know, dig deeply in it. I mean, just every other phrase, I want to stop and think about it, because it's very, Luke is very descriptive,
right?
And he gives us a lot of details. So I do love, Matthew records this as well, but I really like how Luke writes about it in Luke 9, verses 28 through 36.
Yep.
Do you want to read it or you want me to? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've got it. If you want me to read it, then I can definitely do that. So it reads like this. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James, and he went up on a mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. And suddenly, sorry about that. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. And they appeared in glory and were speaking about his exodus, which he was about to fulfill in Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but as they awoke, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not realizing what he was saying. And while he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen, listen to him." And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen.
Are you stopping there? Or are you going to go on?
Do you want me to go on?
It doesn't matter. Well, in this, you can stop there, or you can go on to the next thing that happened.
We can go to the next thing.
It's up to you.
Yeah, okay. Let's continue on. I was going to say, yeah, I wasn't sure how far we wanted to go. It says this, on the next day when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." And suddenly a spirit seizes him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. And Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and put up with you? Bring your son here." While he was being brought forward, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions, but Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God.
Wow. And I was thinking the whole time, Hollywood can't keep up. I mean, this story is so amazing that it just, I mean, you can just picture it. And these are really two separate stories.
Right.
But the first thing that jumps out to me is about 8 days after. It's about a week after what?
Right.
What is he talking about? But if you go back just a little bit, it's at the height of his ministry. Jesus is popular and all of that. And then all of a sudden, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do the crowd say that I am?" And then, that's a story of when Peter blurts out, "You're the Messiah." And then Jesus just drops this bomb and tells them that he's going to suffer and he's going to be betrayed and he's going to be killed and raised. And I can imagine they, that kind of just hit them like, out of nowhere.
Right.
But then he says, if you want to follow me, you're going to have to deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for my sake will find it.
Right.
And then it just seems like from that point, then you would pick up with our passage today about 8 days later. And you just wonder if this was this mic drop moment, like left them all speechless. Nothing's recorded.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. And then Jesus takes his inner circle and he goes up on the mountain to pray.
Yeah, this was something that happened a lot. Jesus by himself. He would often go up and pray. But scripture, definitely a lot of the other scriptures, they always talk about how Jesus would go by himself to kind of have this revitalization that he would get away from the crowds, get away from everything to stay essentially connected. I can just imagine the disciples, probably there's a longing. They want to know what happens in those sessions. You know what I'm saying? Like what happens when Jesus goes off by himself. And so now here is this opportunity where the disciples, at least 3 of them, his inner circle, they actually get to go and see the reality of what does this look like when he goes off to pray, when he goes off kind of to be about by himself, to re-energize, to do all of those things. And so you can just see this excitement, I would imagine, within their brains, within their minds of like, yes, we get to go and we get to experience this. And it's really funny because Peter essentially kind of falls flat on his face.
Right. Well, I know, like from, I guess, my childhood or growing up, when I would hear this story, I kind of thought of it as a story that Jesus was going to go, like Jesus knew he was going to go up on the mountain and he was going to like unzip his, the veil that's, hiding his glory. And he kind of knew it. But now that I look back at it, it just seemed like this was just what he always did, that he just went up there to pray. And this happened while he was praying. And the word for prayer, he's actually dialoguing, he's exchanging, he's having this conversation. It's not like a monologue, it's a two-way conversation with God in real time. So he's having this conversation and it just happens. It didn't seem to be like a premeditated, like, come on, boys, I'm going to show you my glory kind of thing. It was like this happened as he was communicating with his father. And then all of a sudden his appearance begins to change. And we see that in the other lectionary passages. You see that in the Old Testament passage with Moses when he was in the presence of God. When he would go up on the mountain, he would come back down the mountain with this face that was just glowing. But of course not like Jesus. I mean, this is like God here. This is, Jesus is man and God. But can you imagine as he's doing this, that his face just changes. And Matthew tells us it's like bright as the sun. I mean, that is just crazy to me that he just turns into something that's completely other. There's no other way to describe it. They couldn't really compare it. They would kind of say like, well, his clothes became dazzling, and
Mhm.
it was kind of like lightning, and just trying to struggle with finding a what he actually looked like. But can you imagine?
No, I can't. That would, yeah, it's phenomenal just to try to grasp, and
Right,
it's. I think that it's so fitting that they can't find the words to really, I think,
right,
to describe. Like I said, I think they're just doing their best to somehow get a point, get across the reality of this moment, the magnitude of this moment.
right,
But yeah, like, and it goes so deep. Like I said, the fact that his appearance changed, I mean, it really is this reality of, it's almost like they didn't recognize Jesus
right,
in this moment. They had walked with Jesus, they had been with Jesus, they had seen all these miracles, they had seen all of these things happen, and obviously they're disciples. They've been with him essentially every step of the way, and now they're seeing him in a different way.
right,
And there's something about the glory of God that, I think as it's revealed to us, hopefully, and as the glory is shown to us, it should change us. I think it changes
right,
us definitely spiritually, but I think there is something physically to it as well.
right.
And if we allow it to do that, but I love the language there and them just trying. And then obviously, as this change happens, these two other dudes essentially show up and start talking to Jesus.
Right. And I think it's important too to point out that this was not like a spotlight on Jesus.
Right.
This was coming
From
from
him.
within. This was the fullness of God. It's just seeping out. It's beaming. This
Mhm.
fullness of God radiating. It's streaming like from the inside. It's a manifestation of his deity. And they witnessed that. And then as if that wasn't crazy
Right.
enough. I mean, their eyes weren't full enough. And then, like you said, suddenly they saw two men. And it's not just any two men. And, you can think about Moses and Elijah, but how did they, number one, how did they know? It's not like they
Mm.
had pictures to compare, but they knew this was Moses and Elijah, and they were talking like just. I just imagine just hanging out.
Yeah.
And but they appeared in glory, and but then they were talking about their conversation was it's very specific here that they were talking about the departure of Jesus, his exodus, and
Mm.
that he was going to be accomplishing soon in Jerusalem. So they're talking about that, a very specific conversation.
Yep. No, 100%. And it's almost like a pep talk. It's we know the weight of the Lent season and kind of what we are leading towards, the weight of the cross. And I think it weighed heavy on Jesus,
Right.
I think on a deep level, because he obviously knows the reality of where the road and where the journey is going to lead him. And I love that Jesus doesn't do it alone. Like there's just something beautiful about that. And what's awesome is, Jesus asked this question, "Who do people say I am?" And lots of times their response was, "Well, people say you're a prophet, or people say, you're Elijah, or whatever." But it's these two that essentially come to Jesus, and like I said, it's this pep talk, it's this encouragement, and so even Jesus doesn't go the road alone. He's
Mm.
got people essentially in his corner who've walked, hard roads. Elijah and Moses both were great in the faith, but they both had struggles, and they both
Right.
had their journey was hard, and so they were able, I think, to breathe life into Jesus. And how much
Right.
more do we need people to breathe life into us?
That's
So many
good.
times we think that we can take this road alone, that we can take this journey alone. But even Jesus himself had to have this, he had these who were breathing life. And like I said, I think it just gives a little bit of a glimpse into the reality of Jesus's whole life, of as he would go off to be with his Father. I think it just gives us a little bit of a glimpse of that reality, and it just puts new meaning to the words that we often hear of, like, we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and
Mm.
all of that. And it's it's just so true, and it's so cool to see that played out within this role with the disciples, but with Moses and Elijah and them coming to Jesus and to encourage him, to uplift him, to talk about, hey, these things are coming, and hey, go get it, and stay true to the end, be faithful to the end, and it's really, really cool.
Right. So Peter sees them and they're sleepy. They're weighed down with sleep. But it said, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with them. So I take that they were very, very sleepy, but they weren't all the way out, and they were probably rubbing their eyes going, am I seeing things right? Am I seeing things? But they did see. So this tells us this was probably at night, but they were able to stay awake. And so they saw glory. And then I think the word that they saw is interesting because it's more than just a physical seeing that they just actually saw this. But if you look at the word in the Greek, it means that they, it's not just a physical seeing, but it's like an aha, I get it. They understand what's happening here. So they're seeing this dignity and this value, like the preciousness of Jesus. And they're starting to put all this together. They see his appearance. And so now they're starting to get it, like this really is God. I mean, Peter had just made that declaration before. So now he's seeing, his skin, and he's seeing all this, and he's seeing Moses and Elijah, and you can't blame him, his response. He wants to worship, but he's a little misguided, because he says, Master, it's good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And he didn't really know. It says he doesn't know what he said, and this, he kind of yells out because they were leaving, and he says, hold up, wait, don't leave. But he's wanting to hang out. He's not wanting them to leave yet. He's wanting to just spend time. We want to make this dwelling here. That's kind of the tents that they would dwell in for about a week every year during the festival of booths. And it's a time that they could be thankful for God's provision and then look forward to the kingdom. So maybe Peter, he could have been trying to put 2 and 2 together, because Jesus had just said about a week before that they would see the kingdom come. So now I wonder if he's like, okay, it's here. Let's just tabernacle here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such there's so much imagery and there's so much playback to the Old Testament within this passage on a very deep level, which is so cool that Scripture does that. And this stuff is all over Scripture, and that's what I love about Scripture on such a deep level. You think of the glory of God, and in the Hebrew, sense, it's this weight. It's this the glory of God is this weight that is upon you, and I think that they are very much sensing it, and on that level. And you have the flash of light, you have this bright light, and then you have this cloud that comes. And once again, I think the people's minds, the Israelites' minds, Jewish minds, would go back to that reality of when they did have a tabernacle, right? They were led by fire, light at night, and a cloud by day. And so, I think for us, it's easy for us at the same time to be like Peter, though, that when we have these experiences, when we have, when we experience God and his glory on a different level, it's easy for us to want to stay there, to try to replicate, to try to get back to that place of, this is where we felt good. This is where we felt the glory. And so how can we maintain this? And I think that we do that on such a deep level today. I think we do it every Sunday, right? Like we've lots of times for us, Sunday is a very important day. It's because we have felt the weight of God. We've seen God's glory lots of times on Sunday mornings. I think sometimes we keep on going back to that well, though, expecting to kind of have this glory kind of over and over and over again. And I think sometimes we need to listen to this and listen to kind of what Jesus says, that sometimes I don't think we realize that, God's glory is big, it's vast, it's everywhere. And we don't have to necessarily go somewhere to be able to experience that glory. And but obviously I think that's essentially what happens in this cloud. This cloud consumes them, and then they hear this voice who says, hey, this is my son, my chosen, listen to him. And they were terrified, rightfully so. They were terrified.
Right. And I think it's interesting that they saw his skin change, they saw his clothes change, they saw two dead people come back,
Right.
And none of that scared them, but it was the cloud that terrified them. That's interesting to me, because I think I would have been freaked out over, seeing my best friend like turned white, but that didn't. And then dead people, I mean, come on, but they were afraid of the cloud, and they were terrified as they entered it. And, but like mid-sentence, like while he was saying this, when Peter was saying all of that about let's do let's build tabernacles and all of that, let's build a tent. When he's saying all that, there was a problem, because he was putting Moses and Elijah and Jesus in the same category.
Right.
So as he's saying that, that's when this cloud kind of like okay, hold up, mid-sentence, God interrupts, and it's like he's redirecting him. He doesn't scold or reprimand him, but he just shows up, and of course they're terrified. But I just try to picture this cloud. I mean, was it like a small cloud that was getting closer and closer, or was it bright? It's this heart of the cloud, though, is where God is, and that we see that like in if you read the Old Testament, like with Moses and everything about the cloud, it was terrifying to the people, but it was because that God was there.
Yeah. Well, and even just being in darkness or where you really can't see. And I don't imagine this was a cloud like, oh, we have fog outside, but we can still drive and we can still see. I imagine this cloud was, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And so I don't know if anybody's ever been in that experience where you really can't see anything. It is nerve-wracking on a very deep level. I can't fly in the clouds, but I've been really, really close to kind of in the bottom of the clouds. I don't think the FAA probably listens to us, but that's a big no-no. I was flying at night one time, and it was a little cloudy, and I thought I was staying away, but then all of a sudden I was in the clouds, and and I mean, I immediately nosed over to get below the clouds. But it's really, really scary when you're in those type of situations, because there is a lack of control. There's a lack of, what could happen, in this instance. And so, I think that would be a very, very, very much a terrifying thing. And I love that this is almost a callback to Jeremiah, right? Because a couple weeks ago we talked about Jeremiah and how the call of Jeremiah, what does God tell Jeremiah to do? Hey, go until they don't listen anymore. Like, speak until they don't listen. And so now you have this, hey, this is my son, my chosen. Like, listen to him. Like, make sure that you're listening to what he's saying and the reality of the gospel and the kingdom that he is bringing forth, and don't let it pass you by. And, they had a choice of whether they were going to listen or not. And, the road to the cross, it doesn't get easier, any step by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, it's true. And then also they're getting ready for a transition. Jesus is going to eventually ascend. I mean, it's not that far away from when this happened, because this isn't too far from the cross. But, I think in some ways, he was preparing him, because he had the prophet and he had the law there, but he's saying, hey, listen to Jesus. What's Jesus teaching you? Pay attention to what he has, because they're going to be leading the future church. They're going to be starting, you're going to have this transition from Judaism to Christianity. But listen to Jesus, follow the voice of Jesus, follow his teachings, because, it's not that he does away with the law, but he extends it, and he actually raises the bar. So he's saying, listen to him. There's going to be a lot of noise. There's going to be a lot of confusion, but listen to him.
It's good. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it would be awesome if they were truly, I imagine the excitement, but it says that they left, right? What they found, when the voice had spoken, Jesus was alone. and then they kept silent. They didn't tell anybody what they had seen, which is it's very common around Jesus and some of the other parables and things that lots of times Jesus would tell people, hey, don't tell people what you've seen or whatever. But there definitely is something within them that I don't know if it was embarrassment maybe from some of their thoughts, some of their ideas, but they definitely walk away and they don't say anything to anybody about it.
Right. Well, I think it's important to this little word, listen to him. If you look at the part of speech, it's a present imperative, and it means not to just listen to him right now, like right while you're on the mountain, but it's an ongoing, it's a long-term way of doing something as a lifestyle.
Yep.
So it's an ongoing, like from now on, in multiple situations, repeatedly, habitually, we've got to continually listen to what Jesus says. And from what I understand, like this whole moment's kind of like a hinge. It's like we're seeing this door closing on the law and opening up to grace. And it's really just such a pivotal moment. Like I said, there's so much in this passage that we could just zero in, but that's really kind of a cool thing, because after this, like I said, he does eventually get to the cross, and this is like a hinge in history that's taking place on this mountain that we see right here.
Yeah, it's such a cool story. Such a cool story.
Yeah.
And like I said, we probably could talk about it forever, but it is really interesting what happens the next day. They're Peter, James, and John. They have this experience. Obviously, other disciples haven't really been up there, and so we do get a little bit of a glimpse into the reality of what they were trying to do or what they were participating in. And the next day it says they come down from the mountain. Obviously, a great crowd meets them. And then this man in the crowd shouts out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." And then, we have read it, but I'm sure we'll continue to do it. But it's obviously this boy, there's this spirit, and it's been seizing him, and, it causes all these shrieks, convulsions. He's asked the disciples to do something, but he says there's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah. And then I think it is probably in another gospel, it's prayer and fasting. That's what it's going to take. And it's weird because you have this beautiful passage before about this transfiguration. Then it's like all of a sudden, like we were talking tonight in our Bible study about what would you hear, see, taste, and smell. Like if you came down the mountain, I mean, you would hear the screaming, and you would hear the cries, and you would hear all of this noise, and probably smelled bad. It's like, what a contrast in this beautiful story that was just told on the mountain, and they get down from there. And life is that way. Sometimes we're up on the mountain, and then like we're not, we can't live for mountaintop experiences, but it's just, that story just seems like, I don't know, if I was preaching it, I don't know if I could go to that. Because it's such I don't know. It's like, wow, I just want to keep lingering in the glory on the mountain, and I don't want to get down to a demon-possessed child. Yeah.
But the reality is there's people around us now who are having experiences where they need people in their lives. They need change. They need people to advocate. They need people to step up. They need people to step in. It's not easy. It's very, very hard. Obviously, the disciples, they struggled with this. I don't think it's from a desire, from a place where there's not a desire to be able to do something for this kid. But obviously, like, they're not able to fully experience. And now you have this glory, this kabod, this, coming down. And Jesus is almost, he's upset, he knows he's heading towards the cross, like he's heading towards this finality of his life. And he knows there's a limited amount of time now that he has left with his disciples. He has a limited amount of time to continue to make sure that the gospel of the message of the gospel, the way of the kingdom, is passed on to this group of ragtag people that he has tried to impart this upon. And so he knows that time is of the essence. And so he comes down, and there's just this frustration, which is beautiful and such a beautiful. I mean, it's such a beautiful emotion,
Right.
because even Jesus, right? Like he was such a human. Like there's a humanity of Jesus is so prevalent, I think, within this passage. And I think so many times we elevate Jesus to this level, just like, no, like he struggled with the people that were around him. He struggled with his friends. Like, and so many times we just think that the life of following Jesus is supposed to be this bliss. And it's like, no, we're supposed to struggle with each other. We're supposed to challenge each other. We're supposed to try to push each other. I think this is one of those moments where Jesus is trying to push his disciples because he knows that time is of the essence, whereas he's dealing with the people that don't really have that understanding, that time is of the essence.
Right. And I can't help but think too, when he was on the mountain, when he was with Moses, and I mean, they were talking about his exodus.
Yeah.
What would have happened if Jesus had thought, you know what, this cross thing is going to hurt, it's going to be painful. And, I'm just not thinking I want to have a crown of thorns pushed down on my head. And I'm not so sure about those nails in my hands. Let's just forget this. And I'm going to exit with y'all and just leave everybody hanging, right on the mountain. He could have easily changed his mind and said, nah, I'm going back to the Father with y'all. I'm going to exit with y'all. But he didn't. And he was so determined to go through with everything he knew that he had to face. It didn't matter because he loved us so much. And here we have all of these contrasts. He's on the mountain here, and he's dressed in this robe, and it's dazzling white. But then eventually he's going to be stripped naked, and he's going to not have any clothes. And here he's got this great company of where he's respected by, by Peter, James, and John, and, Moses, and he's in this great company. But then the contrast, again, he'll be with thugs and criminals, and, it's going to be such a different thing. And then here he's understood, he's celebrated and worshiped, but there it's like, Jesus who, when he gets to Calvary. And here you have this bright cloud, and then you have darkness at Calvary. And so all of this was just kind of hanging, this contrast, but still he chose, his face was set towards Jerusalem. And, he had his mind made up. And I think his mind, when he came down that mountain, he was always on a mission, but he was on a serious mission that he was going to the cross, that he was going to do whatever it took to save us, out of love, to follow through. And it's just such an amazing story. It's such a pivotal moment in the life of Christ as we move from this epiphany. He shows who he is on the mountain, and he comes back down. He's still healing. He's still doing that. But again, he has this determination that he is going to go to the cross. And, he's determined. He's bound and determined. He's going to follow through with the mission. The whole reason he came, to save us. And he was, on a mission more than ever, I think. I think we see it from here. But I think when he comes down that mountain, he's just determined.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we see that, I think, with the healing. And, it says essentially the demons knew, they knew not to cross him, essentially. And it says all were astounded at the greatness of God, that, with that determination, essentially the greatness of God does come out, and the glory of God is revealed in a beautiful way. Through the life of Jesus. Man, such a cool passage. Like you said, we could talk on and on and on. You've done a much better job of working through this passage than I have. And so, I'm going to give you the final word on this passage as we've looked at it. And it really is such a pivotal passage for the church calendar. So give us your final thoughts. Give us your final words on this passage before we wrap it all up.
Well, my final words, I love what the end of the passage says. All were astounded at the greatness of God. I am too, and I'm astounded at the love of Jesus. I'm just so, I don't know, I'm so touched to think that he loves me. He knew, and he was determined to follow through. There's several other things too that I can't help but let my mind go. Is I'm looking forward to the day of seeing Jesus in all of his glory. I want to see his face, that radiant white, I can't wait. That's a reality. That's a real hope, to be able to see him. And then also love, and this is, just something that I've thought about. There's Moses in this passage, and the last time we hear about Moses, he's blown it. He has so screwed up that he didn't get to go to the promised land, and he dies, and God buries him himself. But wow, how redemptive to see him here. The next thing we know, he's just hanging out with Jesus, and that brings me a lot of hope, just to know that that sometimes we can mess up, and Jesus still loves us, and he redeems us, and he's put him back. Here he is in the limelight, so that brings me a lot of comfort as well. But again, there's just so much in this passage, and I think my final words is we have to position ourselves to see his glory. And Peter, James, and John, they were positioned, they were with Jesus. And if we want to get a glimpse of his glory here on earth, we're going to have to position ourselves and spend time with him, and read scripture and pray, and spend time with him to see glimpses of his glory. Now he will reveal himself as we seek him, as we pray, and as we do those things. And one of these days we'll see him in all of his glory, and that's a reality, and it's something to look forward to.
Such a good word, and a great final word. And we pray and hope that you've enjoyed this conversation, and as much as I have. And
yeah, it's one of my favorite passages.
Such a good passage. So if you would like to reach out to us, if you have comments, questions, concerns, prayer requests, any of those type of things, we do have email. It's growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
And we have Facebook. It is Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to pray for you, just like Pastor Seth said. So reach out to us at any time.
That's right. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation into Lent and all that it's going to have for us. Buckle up, because it doesn't get any easier. Know that we love you. We're praying for you. Grace and peace. God bless, and bye-bye.